Development of the Christian doctrine available in this dark period of European history. Even 50 years ago, the knowledge of Western scholars relative to the Eastern scriptures in Aramaic and the Christian Church in the East was conjectural. Moreover, these scholars knew very little of the Eastern customs and manners in which the biblical literature was nurtured. Even when translating from all of the manuscripts currently available, there is often a great deal of variability in those ancient manuscripts for the same verses. For example, please see the online Oramus Bible browser, which uses the New Revised Standard Version, for the first few verses of Mark. Last accessed July 17, 2014, http bible.oramus.org, passage equals Mark +1. The footnotes show that there are 3 substantial differences among ancient manuscripts and 2 other possible differences in translation, all in just the first 4 verses. They are reproduced below with minor formatting changes to display the footnotes accessed June 10, 2011. 1. The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Or Gospel. Other ancient authorities lack the Son of God too, as it is written in the prophet Isaiah, "See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way." Other ancient authorities read in the prophets GK before your face. 3. The voice of one crying out in the wilderness. Prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. For John the Baptizer appeared in the wilderness, proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. Other ancient authorities read John was baptizing. Other cultural issues in translation. Johannes Lehmann gives an example of the lack of understanding that can occur in trying to translate from culturally different languages. See his Rabbi J. Stein and Day, New York, 1971, pp. 17-19. He refers to the following verse shown from King James. Communication issues. 11. And the 3rd day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. John 2. 1. King James Version. What is this 3rd day? The 3rd day after what? Some translators have totally omitted the reference to the day, others have tried to make it the 3rd day after the wedding. But there is a very simple explanation. Except for the Sabbath, Jewish days do not have names. They are numbered from the Sabbath. Thus the 3rd day is our Tuesday. In the above example, the effect of the translation is unimportant. But in some cases, the whole meaning of the passage has been changed. Lamsa cites a good example of such a dramatic change in meaning. Ibid, page X. In the King James Version, we read in Numbers 25. 4. And the Lord said unto Moses, Take all the heads of the people, and hang them up before the Lord against the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from Israel. The Aramaic reads, And the Lord said unto Moses, Take all the chiefs of the people and expose them before the Lord in the daylight, that the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from the children of Israel. Single quote. There is a dramatic difference between exposing the corruption of a group's chiefs, and hanging them or their heads before God. There is yet another example of dramatic translational alteration in the King James Version. This time it appears to have contributed to the doctrine of the divinity of Jesus. It has to do with the crucial word worship. Here is the King James Version of Matthew 2, 1-2 and 2, 7-8 with emphasis added. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, 12. Development of the Christian doctrine. Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. Matthew 2, 1-2. King James Version. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. Matthew 2, 7-8. King James Version. Here are these same verses as translated in the New American Bible, which is a recent translation drawing from the oldest documents available to the translators, rather than being a revision of earlier translations as the King James Version is. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising and have come to do him homage. Matthew 2, 1-2. New American Bible. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word, that I too may go and do him homage. Matthew 2, 7-8. New American Bible. Notice that the King James Version tells us that the Magi and Herod spoke of worshipping the Christ child, while the New American Bible says they wanted to do him homage. How communication issues. 13. Do we know if do him homage is more correct than worship, or vice versa? First, in general the New American Bible is a more current and scholarly translation than the King James Version. This is not to belittle the effort put into the King James Version, but to simply reiterate Lams's point that there have been great strides in Bible scholarship in the 4 centuries that have passed since it was produced. Furthermore, it makes more sense that Herod would say he wished to pay homage to the one he calls King of the Jews, rather than wanting to worship him. Homage is due to a king, worship is due to one you consider divine. Further evidence is discussed below. Translation of worship. As an example, the natural human tendency is to introduce one's own understanding into a translation. This constitutes a major pitfall in any translation, but in scriptural translation it has wide-ranging consequences, since it affects the religious doctrine upheld by millions of people. There is another example of this translation problem found in almost all versions of John 9:38, shown here from the New American Bible with emphasis added. When Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, he found him and said, Do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered and said, Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. He said, I do believe, Lord, and he worshipped him. John 9:35-38. New American Bible. An authority on the Bible and its original language, George Lamsa, explains the crucial word worshipped as it occurs 14. Development of the Christian doctrine specifically here in John 9:38. In his book Gospel Light A.J. Holman Company, 1936, p. 353, Lamsa writes, The Aramaic word sagad, worship, also means to bend or to kneel down. Easterners in greeting each other generally bow the head or bend down. When a ruler or holy man is greeted, the people kneel before him. He worshipped him does not imply that he worshipped Jesus as one who worshipped God. Such an act would have been regarded as sacrilegious and a breach of the first commandment in the eyes of the Jews, and the man might have been stoned. But he knelt before him in token of homage and gratitude. This is also a sign of self-surrender and loyalty. The blind man worshipped Jesus in acknowledgement of his divine power and in appreciation of his compassion on him in opening his eyes. He had no knowledge of the claims of Jesus, nor was he interested in his teachings, but he was convinced by the miracle performed that he must be a holy man and one empowered by God. It is worth noting here that, in addition to the translation issue discussed above, a footnote for this verse in the 1970 edition of the New American Bible points out that verse 38, the last line quoted above, is omitted in an important biblical manuscript and may have been an addition for a baptismal liturgy. Thus the original may not have included anything about worshipping Jesus. Other translational issues. Bruce M. MECCA, in the introduction to his article Persistent Problems Confronting Bible Translators, Bibliotheca Sacra 150, 599 of 1993, summarizes some translational issues. p. 273. Problems involved in translating the scriptures are many. Some result from the presence of variant readings among the manuscripts of the Old and New Testaments. Others have to do with the meaning of rare words as well as the uncertainty of punctuation of the Hebrew and the Greek texts. Still others relate to the appropriate renderings in English or any other receptor language and bear on the choice of the literary level and style of phraseology. He gives examples of each of the issues he raises. We have already discussed variant readings to some extent. One of his communication issues. 15. Examples here deals with a poor decision by the scribe Ibid, p. 275. One of the most atrocious blunders of this kind is in the minuscule Greek manuscript number 109, dated to the 14th century. This manuscript of the four Gospels was transcribed from a copy that must have had Luke's genealogy of Jesus 3:23, 38 in 2 columns of 28 lines in each. Instead of transcribing the text by following the columns in succession, the scribe of MS 109 copied the genealogy by following the lines across the 2 columns. As an example of the problem of rare words, MECCA gives that of the Greek word used in the Lord's Prayer, which can be translated either as daily bread or bread for tomorrow, but is not found in other contexts to make the meaning clear. Ibid, p. 278. Also, some words can be translated or transliterated, like the Greek word that can be translated to a man or transliterated to the name Adam. MECCA also reports that it was not until the 8th or 9th century AD that Greek scribes began to be at all systematic with their punctuation, and quotation marks are not in any of the manuscripts. Ibid, p. 279. Thus there are inevitable problems with those issues, as differences in punctuation and the placement of quotation marks can definitely change the meaning of a passage. Finally, the order of words in a sentence can change the meaning. Some words have multiple meanings, and might be understood incorrectly. Many passages use masculine-oriented wording but clearly apply to both genders. And the tone and other stylistic considerations all affect the translation. Example of racial bias. MECCA mentioned gender as an area of bias, but it is not the only one. There are several other examples of human introduced bias throughout the Bible. In Genesis, for example, there is an illustration of racial bias as shown in these verses from the King James Version. 16. Development of the Christian doctrine. And Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old, when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. Genesis 16, 15-16. King James Version. For Sarah conceived, and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. Genesis 21, 2-5. King James Version. This means that Ishmael was 14 years old when Isaac was born. And it came to pass after these things, that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee unto the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Genesis 22, 1-2. King James Version. But we know that Isaac was never the only son of Abraham. Ishmael was Abraham's only son for 14 years until Isaac was born. Thus, it appears that the Jewish writer may have wanted to bestow the honor upon Isaac, his ancestor. Some have raised the possibility that Ishmael might not be considered a son